with the question that I'm sure that you all are dying to know, which is what exactly is ketogenic nutrition or the keto diet as it's often referred to?
Yay. Just a quick sound check. Are you good? You can hear me okay?
I hear you great.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm excited to talk about this topic because you're right. It's such a common one that we're always talking about it. So I think, if everybody or some of the folks were in the last call, you learned that we don't just do at Remission Nutrition, we don't just do a ketogenic diet, but we definitely use it as one of our tools quite a lot. So I would say I was thinking about this a lot. What is a ketogenic diet? And I think of it as more of a therapeutic diet. And I like how you said ketogenic nutrition because that sounds really nice rather than diet. But we use it as a therapeutic diet. We don't use any diet or would never say that any diet is a cure for cancer or a standalone sort of treatment. It is an integrative piece to the puzzle and it can be quite helpful. So scientifically, I guess what a ketogenic diet is utilizing a different sort of macronutrient ratio or percentage or arrangement and changing. So our bodies operate on glucose usually. So we're glucose burning machines. And what we do with the ketogenic diet is we take away the glucose as much as we can, and we use ketones, for fuel, which we get from fat, whether it's dietary fat or body fat. Our bodies then produce ketones and run off of that as fuel. And there's several reasons why we may utilize that or why that might be helpful in a cancering journey or any sort of a health journey. The biggest thing with cancer is that we take away the cancer's sort of primary, I would say, preferred fuel source, and we give it ketones instead. So the body can operate on ketones. It just, you need to take away the glucose in order for those ketones to be there and abundant. I don't know if that was a very good explanation, but ultimately it's a therapeutic diet that we use.
It was a great explanation, and automatically my mind is turning circles because I like to think about that from the direction of somebody who might be hearing it for the first time. And so we'll unpack it more as we go along with the questions. But in your opinion, what are some of the pros and cons of somebody choosing a plan such as this? And to your point, I really like what you said too, because we know that word diet is a really tough one. Now, sometimes the word diet is used synonymously with how we eat, but for the most part, when somebody says diet, I immediately go to the hairs up on my back because it feels like deprivation. I'm on something, that kind of thing. And I have a funny feeling that our listeners probably have some of that same experience. I don't want to make the assumption. So let's start unpacking it slowly and see whether or not the listeners feel like we can kind of guide them in the direction of, is it right for them? Or is it something that they want to investigate further? So share with me your opinion on pros and cons of choosing a plan like this.
Yeah, I think I would say I'm going to start with cons because I feel like what can happen, especially right now, again, we use that word diet. The ketogenic diet is very, very trendy right now. It's very fad like.
Yes.
So there's a con. There's a lot of stuff available. And this kind of ties into some of the other questions we talked about, but there's a lot of information out there that
Yes.
isn't healthy,
Right.
ketogenic therapeutic diet.
Right.
And so that's a big, giant con. There's all this fake food. I mean, you can eat, just like you can eat any kind of a junk food diet, you can eat a junk food keto diet. So there's a lot of information out there. And like I said, I mean, go to Costco and look at all the labels on the foods, and you see keto friendly, keto this, keto that, and the ingredients are junk.
Yep.
And so that's what makes me sort of sad about it, because what we do is use it literally as a therapeutic diet. And
Mm.
it might not be forever. We try, maybe it's a 3 month sort of a situation where we're like, let's see what happens with your labs and things like that by going into a very healthy ketogenic diet.
Right.
So it can be tough because food has a lot of, oh gosh, we could go on so many different topics here, but there's a lot of sort of emotion attached with food. And
Right.
so somebody gets a diagnosis, they're already in quite a state. And then they're told, hey, let's try this ketogenic diet. And all they hear is deprivation.
That's right.
So they're like, let's, and now I have to give up, give up, give up. And what I try to do is help people understand that you're actually, you might be giving up certain things, but you can bring in a lot of really amazing foods, and everybody's in a different place. Some people are eating a standard American diet. Some people are maybe eating a different sort of vegan diet. Some people are eating no fat, you
Mhm.
know? So there's a lot that comes with explaining how to do it I don't know, just it doesn't have to feel like deprivation. And
It
that's
doesn't.
what our job is. If you just go on the internet, you're not going to get that support,
Right.
you know?
Right. I agree with you. And the trouble I see is that classic our culture, what happens is we try to figure out the plan to get the result, right? To get it's like A to B. And with this situation and this conversation, this is not a linear conversation by any stretch, I think, because when we're talking about the cancering journey, we need to remind ourselves that all things are not equal in this conversation. And if we put the ketogenic nutrition lifestyle over here, where somebody is just trying to use it to quote unquote lose weight, we've lost the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing. And I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but just to recap so far what Jen has shared with us, the ketogenic nutrition therapeutic plan, if you will, as it relates to a cancering journey is extremely, when I say specific, there are some guardrails, some guidelines that we want to make sure that we put in place. And some of them are things that if you're a repeat listener, we've already discussed. But we don't want to hang out in a place where a nutrition plan can get what I would say, tongue in cheek, dirty instead of clean, right? Which is wholesome food and using food to heal the body as opposed to just try to figure out how to move into ketosis, which I know you're going to talk about in a little bit. So, in a short synopsis, what would you say like a couple of pros would be for somebody who is on the journey that might take away from being on this kind of plan?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the backbone, and I'm sure I said this the last time, but of what we do and feel is very important is this metabolic approach to
Right.
cancer. So utilizing a ketogenic diet, which can be different, there's different levels of ketosis.
Mm,
Using a low carb slash ketogenic diet can be very helpful in terms of metabolic health.
yes.
And I mean, that's what it does. That's what
Yes.
we hope it does. And
Right.
so that's huge because having that metabolic health then is quite impactful for all of the terrains. So
Right.
we always go to making the terrain of the body or the garden, so to speak, as healthy as possible. So cancer isn't happy there.
That's
And
right.
that's what ultimately I feel and we feel that this diet can do. And again, it's different. There's different levels of it. I love the word clean. We would want somebody to have a very clean rather than dirty sort
Hmm.
of ketogenic plan.
Right.
And again, different levels, and every single person we work with is different. So it's not just this handout blanket approach.
Absolutely. One of the pros that I can share with the listeners when my brother was utilizing a ketogenic plan was tremendous, tremendous energy post the start of it. There's a little bit of a learning curve, and you hear about the quote unquote keto flu, which I'm sure some folks are going to probably ask about what that is. But once you're over that hump of now getting into burning fat and really utilizing that as the fuel source, the energy is off the charts. You feel like $1,000,000, right? And so I would say, as a pro, that was really nice to see that it not only did it not feel like deprivation after a certain short period of time, it was actually a lot of stamina and energy when you switch over to that pathway of using fuel from fat.
Yeah.
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 So which is great, which is great. I also want to say, and maybe you could comment on this as the expert, one of the things that I hear the most about keto is the weight loss. And so for somebody who is on the journey, that feels really scary. And I would love for you to talk about a little bit that the byproduct, in my experience, is that you will see some weight loss utilizing this plan. But it is a very different kind of weight loss. And again, I'll use my brother as an example. My brother needed to lose some body fat. So going on keto plan actually was really supportive of losing body fat that put him, as his integrative doctor said, in his best like his best fighting stance, even though I don't love that word fighting, but gave him optimal opportunity to start healing and going through the journey, really supported by nutrition.
Yeah. And I think, thinking about that term, that fighting, it's like they're fighting weight. So it's almost like a term that's used
Fighting weight,
if somebody
yes.
needs to lean up, lean down. Anyway, that's what they're talking about. And so because you want to have that lean body mass, you want to have that muscle mass, you don't want to lose that, but it's okay to lose some of the body fat.
Right.
And this is probably one of the most common conversations we have at
Right.
Remission Nutrition, because the doctors will say to somebody, look, no matter what you do, please don't lose any weight.
Right.
And even if somebody is 30 pounds overweight, they still don't want to see that, because that can be scary, because perhaps they're going into that cachectic state. But what is important is to know that, first of all, when we go into ketosis, yes, it's often that people might drop 10 pounds.
Yeah.
So if they have some weight to lose, that's okay. And they can, it's really interesting. I wanted to talk about this briefly because it ties in. So if somebody is very, very thin, they get a cancer diagnosis and they're very thin, then for them to lose, they don't have a lot of body fat to lose.
Yeah.
So we need to be extra, extra diligent to keep their body mass in check. So we need to use certain things like enough fat. And that is one of the more challenging things with the ketogenic diet, is people are like, what? That much fat? For that person, it's critical. It's not only critical to get enough dietary fat, which is a lot, and to do exercise. So using the muscles, because that will help the weight. We know muscle weighs more than fat. So that'll keep their weight on and keep the doctors happy and their labs looking good.
Right.
Then we've got the person who may have 30 pounds to lose. They can actually burn fat and have ketosis run pretty smoothly with not as much dietary fat, because they've got it there. So it's really interesting how that all works. But what happens if you were just to listen, say you listen to that advice, eat whatever you want, it's okay. Then you're going to, yes, keep your weight up or gain weight, but it's going to be in more of an inflammatory way, because you're probably using carbohydrates to do that, instead of getting the fat in and the protein in to keep your lean body mass in check. So that's really what we're after. So I don't know if that helps, but
Oh, it's amazing. And I feel like this is, if I could just raise flags and say, come to this part of the session, this is super important for all of us to hear, because in summary, what Jen is trying to say is that comes down to being your own advocate. If this is an avenue of which you're interested in, this is a tough one, because the pushback, as you mentioned, with many of our doctors is that don't lose weight. And in reality, what we're trying to do is put the body in that optimal internal environment, that terrain, that internal garden, like as you mentioned. And there is some adjusting that needs to occur depending on who the person is. And I feel like we're answering some of the latter questions, but being your own advocate and understanding why you want to investigate keto in the first place, and then being able to have the appropriate answers to be able to respond to doctors, I think is so, so important, really important. Which leads me to my next question, because I'm hopeful that our listeners will have this question. I was trying to forefront think all the things that we as a family, wanted to know when it came to this plan for my brother, which was, is there sound information or data that somebody who is listening could take a quick look-see and then maybe do some copying, pasting, printing it out, and being able to show their doctors what it is that they are trying to accomplish instead of them trying to remember everything that we're saying on their session today.
Yeah, you bet. I will share. I have some studies that are wonderful, that are fairly recent, that I will send to you.
Great.
And I will also say that it's fun because a lot of our clients have actually handed out the book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, to
Yes.
some of their doctors. And it's been fairly well received, which is
Right.
cool.
Right.
Where they're like, whoa. I mean, I had a client one time that she was so cute and so good at advocating for herself. She's super inspiring to me.
Yes.
And she, not only did she bring in the book, she also had a conversation with her doctor, this younger guy that was drinking a soda in their meeting.
Ah,
And she said to him, how can you do that? Like, and kind of schooled him a little bit. And he actually, months later, thanked her. He
yes.
lost weight. He,
Yes.
really learned a lot from that. So it's not that, the doctors don't want to listen and learn. It's just not something that they've been trained to do, is to look at diet. They have a
Right.
lot of other things to do,
Right.
not
I
diet.
think we talked about that a little bit before. I don't know if it's still the same way, but when I had done my research before, I think our many of our traditional doctors, our clinical doctors, have less than 6 months of nutrition training. So again, per Jen and I, we are not at all bashing any of our
Mhm.
doctors on either side of alternative and complementary, integrative, or traditional medicine. What we're saying is that everybody seems to have their lane, and but most importantly, we need to empower all of us to understand the information, understand the why you're doing something, and then don't be afraid to say, I've chosen this because, and here's the sound research. And that's truly one of the purposes of Food for Thought, is to give our listeners an opportunity to ask really hard questions and then provide them with the answers that they can go to and advocate for their particular healing process. We know everybody's different. Everybody's going to require something maybe a little bit different. And having that knowledge to hear it first and then to turn around and try to explain the why, I found very challenging, in our situation, because you want to do a great job, but then here you are standing in front of somebody who is the expert in what they're the expert for. So nutrition is one of those things that I'm putting my little wand out there. I'm making you all the expert of your own nutrition, and taking this information and doing your own solid research to know your why. And then if you want to investigate it further, we can take that a step further. So what Jen is going to do is provide us with some research information. I'm going to make sure in the playback that that's going to be a part of the links, but we also have some more resources for you. So a couple more questions, Jen, for you. If after this conversation, one of our listeners is like, you know what, this sounds like something that I would like to learn about a little bit more, what would be step number one? I'm going to speak on the side of, you've already been given the diagnosis, so we're on the journey, and somebody would like to investigate this. Where would you say the starting place is?
Well, I mean, I'm going to say it, and I'm not trying to plug the book, but I would start reading The Metabolic Approach if you've not. The Metabolic Approach to Cancer by Jess Kelly, our founder, and Dr. Nisha Winters. So that is a really great spot, I believe, to start. Chapter 4 in particular, so you don't have to read it cover to cover right away, but chapter 4 in particular is more about the food piece and the ketogenic diet. So that's one place. There are many places to go. Obviously, at Remission Nutrition, we're there for you as well. I was thinking about this question too, and where would someone start? It all depends on, I would say, the severity of the diagnosis, the type of diagnosis, the treatment plan, and things like that. So there's, if somebody's like gung ho, I am ready, I want to get into ketosis and I want to quickly, then we can utilize things like fasting to get somebody into a state of ketosis more quickly. For some people who are a little bit like, I'm not quite ready for this, then we might start going, okay, let's start looking at, your current diet, and how can you start to sort of peel away some things and add some other things in. So my first thing would be sugar. And I mean, numero uno,
Yes, I
sugar.
100% agree with
Yeah.
that comment. That is,
So it's a little bit of a two-part question because there are some resources out there that somebody might read. Miriam Kalamian's book, Keto for Cancer, is also quite good.
love
Um,
that.
because it's specific to oncology. There are, different cookbooks and things out there that give some explanation, but there aren't as many resources out there that are geared toward oncology that you might
Mhm.
like to, you know what I'm saying, that I can recommend.
Right. And
So
to your point about, and I appreciate what you said about not necessarily feeling like you are plugging, but I am going to, because here's the thing. When we start doing specific things for healing on the cancering journey, my personal opinion is that we do want to be connected with somebody who understands the cancering journey. And so if you're somebody who studies nutrition, who has a nutrition background, and you want to start in that lighter, you know, reading a couple of books or investigating some resources that that you come across, that's one thing. But if somebody is just brand spanking new to keto, because I have to say, and I hope you agree with me, not keto's not great for everybody on the cancering journey. Can you just give us one example of where you might not utilize keto for someone?
yeah, I mean, there can be, I mean, there's probably a lot of different reasons. And oftentimes, I mean, our biggest job, my biggest job is to meet people where they are.
Right.
So that would be, there can be some certain roadblocks there or things, barriers that we need to work through. Um, some people have this strong fear of fat.
Yeah.
And they're like, or there might be some issues with digestion where people
Mm-hmm.
have a tough time with all the fat, and then we can utilize certain things to support them
Mm-hmm.
and the digestion piece with certain enzymes and whatever else. Um, there's some people, gosh, that might just not feel all that amazing from it. I tend to, with most of the people we work on taking out grain-based carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Autoimmune conditions, that's another one that can be really challenging with, a ketogenic diet, autoimmune. So we kind of have to look at, I really try to zoom out and look at the whole picture and then go, okay, where do we need to kind of like, there's an example. I had a client just yesterday who has some pretty significant, like, autoimmune issues. She's also got cancer, but probably rising to the top is not the cancer. So we're trying to figure out how we deal with this mast cell activation syndrome that she has. It's
Mm-hmm.
wicked. And so going, oh, nope, keto, let's do that, does not work and
Mm-hmm.
won't work for her. So again, it's very individualized. I don't think that it would hurt somebody necessarily if they were just like, okay, I'm going to do this. What I think would hurt somebody is an unhealthy internet keto, or could
Fair
hurt,
enough.
because
Good
then
point.
you're getting all of this processed stuff and you're not getting healthy food. So, I don't know.
So this is a hot seat question from me.
Love
You and
it.
I didn't talk about this, but can you give one food example of how we go wonky with the I'm on keto, but I'm on keto over here from the internet? Just give us one example so the listeners can know, like, how that fits in to be not necessarily wary, but how we've kind of shaped keto to be what we want it to be as opposed to what it was intended to be.
Totally. Interestingly, there are many like companies out there that are doing all of these like zero carb foods, and they're
Mm,
processed foods. It might be a bread or a bagel or something like that. So this is just one example. You've got to read the ingredients because
100%.
I don't know how they do it, but the things that they put in, there's gluten, there's wheat is in the ingredients. And I'm like, how did they make that zero carbs? So it's not even really a food. It there are better options out there that use real food, and you can make a nice sort of ketogenic bread that
Yes.
doesn't need to be. Now therein lies the issue with people that don't feel well, they don't feel like cooking, so we work with that all the time. But that is one place where you could go off, because if you're putting in wheat, gluten, things like that, that can be very inflammatory to the body. We don't want that.
And so the bottom line is, we're going to circle back from the very beginning, is that we're trying to create an environment in the body that supports optimal healing and doesn't trigger more inflammation. We're trying to essentially keep that garden nice and tidy and keep it supportive of the healing. So I guess my next question is wrapped around and I'm asking because I'm basing it on, we do have some questions coming in, but what would be, I talked about in the beginning that there's this little bit of a transition from the way we were eating and then moving into what you referenced as ketosis, and ketosis referencing that we've now switched the pathway from using glucose as our fuel to using fat. What does that process look like? How uncomfortable, depending on where you bring somebody in, is it just miserable and they should just prepare themselves, or is it kind of like I can get there and it's a couple of days?
Yeah, I think again, the famous answer is always it depends.
Right.
But I would say that depending on how metabolically inflexible someone is, meaning they might be somebody who can't go without food for an hour or two.
Yeah.
They might be somebody who has to eat before they go to bed or at night after dinner. They might wake up in the middle of the night. They might wake up in the first thing in the morning and have to run to food. That's somebody that is likely fairly inflexible and on this blood sugar roller coaster. For that person, we might need to ease them a little bit more so they feel okay doing it. If it's somebody that's like, oh yeah, I can do this. I fast sometimes, or I have pretty balanced blood sugar, then it might be a little bit easier for them to
Yeah.
go into ketosis. So
Yes.
everybody gets there at a different rate. Again, if we needed to really speed somebody up, we could do some fasting, but we would really need to support that person, and the ketogenic flu, I know that was one of the comments, is a real thing, and
Yes.
it can make you feel like junk. So what we try to do is avoid that. My way, if I have the luxury, is really stepping down the carbohydrates. So I might start a little bit higher in carbs and then step them down so they feel well. And testing, and that's a whole huge topic, but we can also test for ketones. We can start with urine strips in the very beginning. They don't work for very long, and then go to, I prefer blood with like a keto mojo or something. So we can stair step down into ketosis, and that usually helps people feel better
Yes.
because it's gradual in. The ketogenic flu can make us feel literally flu-like, which is no fun. The most important thing is knowing that a side effect of the ketogenic diet is this thing that happens. The kidneys excrete these really important electrolytes. And so you need to get more electrolytes in. So that's important with fasting and with a ketogenic diet. So salt, 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 not the regular table salt, of course, but like Himalayan sea salt. Salt your foods. Oftentimes too, what happens is people go from eating maybe a more processed food diet where they're getting a ton of salt, then all of a sudden they go in and they're eating more real whole foods and they're not getting as much sodium.
Yes.
So people are a little bit afraid of salt, but really we can handle quite a lot. And we
100%.
watch labs.
And what I'm hearing you say is that, again, this is a plan that you can find many different entry points. So again, just to remind everybody, this is not a one size fits all situation, and why I'm super passionate about making sure that our big folks are completely have access to the resources and meeting them just as you mentioned where they are, but even more importantly, working with folks who, even just by listening to today, which is not a commitment other than the 45 minutes, to understand why you are doing what you're doing and then picking your appropriate team members to support your healing journey. I love that. I absolutely love that. So, Jen, do you have any other resources, wink, wink, that you'd like to share with us before I put you on the hot seat with our listeners' questions?
Yeah, you bet. So, as I mentioned earlier, there aren't that many resources out there that are really specific to oncology. I have found recently a couple of my new favorite books, and I don't think I showed these last time. Well, I couldn't have because I wasn't on
Yeah, there
screen.
you go.
So, this one,
Love
I'm
that
just going to show
one.
you. Yeah,
Yes.
I love this book. It's the new Mediterranean Diet Cookbook. When you go to buy it, be sure it looks like this because there are about a million books with
Yep.
Mediterranean diet in them. This one does say the optimal keto friendly diet that burns fat, promotes longevity, and prevents chronic disease. The thing that I love about this book is that it's not perfect. There aren't any that I can find, but it gives so much information at the bottom of each recipe. So it gives you all of the macronutrients. And remember, I know I said macronutrients earlier. That's where we get our calories. So that's fat, protein, carbohydrate. With a ketogenic diet, we're eating very little carbohydrate, we're eating moderate protein, and we're eating a lot of fat. And so it gives you those numbers. And I love that. When you go online, when you go to other cookbooks, sometimes you're just kind of guessing. I mean, we sometimes give recipes that don't have that data. And so we're working on that. It's important. The other one is this one. And this one's called Squeaky
I
Clean
haven't
Keto.
seen that one.
It's pretty thick. There's a lot of recipes in here. Again, not perfect. However, I like it because there's a lot of really great sauces in here. And that is the key to a ketogenic diet in my mind, is adding in, you might still be eating those piles of green vegetables and your protein, and you're kind of like, all right, well, this is getting kind of boring, and I don't want to just dump olive oil all over my food. Well, you can make these different pestos. You can make chimichurri sauce. You can make, there's a great macadamia nut hummus. So there's all different kinds of sauces, and this book has a ton of them. So I
Love
like
that.
it. That's
I'm
one
gonna
of
buy
the,
that one. I'm gonna buy that one next. That looks beautiful.
yeah.
Might I add too, once we get over we're gonna avoid the keto flu, but if we have a little touch of not feeling great, trying to make that transition, I
Yeah.
might add that when you eat keto friendly, we'll call it, um, the amount of fat is actually makes your food taste unbelievable. One, and that fat keeps us fuller longer. So,
Yes.
just a reminder that on the other side of this, you may end up feeling much better about your nutrition, change the palate to enjoy flavors of cleaner foods, but also it's not something that it's a deprivation feeling. It is a feeling of lovely comfort. You know what I mean? Once you get past, making
Yeah.
the transition. Fat makes food taste great, and it is a problem for the general public because we have been taught for quite some time that fat is bad. And if we leave the conversation with nothing else today, we do not want to say that. There are less healthier fats for sure, but
Yeah.
there are very healthy fats. An example might be your example of the olive oil, but avocados would be another example, really high quality, properly prepared nuts, those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
don't get stuck if you're somebody who really wants to take a look at this. It's not like you're going to be feeling full, and I mean not feeling full and your food's not going to taste good, because it absolutely can taste delicious, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And can I just say along that really quickly? I know you talked about some cons earlier with folks that don't have a huge appetite sometimes because they're undergoing treatment and maybe they are worried about too much weight loss. We do use certain other things to help kind of counteract that because, sometimes you don't have a lot of appetite and you don't want to eat all of that fat because it makes people maybe feel too satiated. So we do have some tips and tricks around that on how to kind of stimulate appetite and really help people out with that. But there's just so many different little things that go into this that it's not just cut and dry.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled, Jen, that we had the chance to talk about it today because keto is something that is very interesting to me, the same way like intermittent fasting is interesting. I'm really fascinated by how we as a culture take something that inherently looks really great and we try to morph it into something that is very confusing. And if nothing else, I hope that our listeners realize that simple, simple, simple. Keep it simple as you possibly can because you have a ton literally on your plate. I don't mean the eating plate, I'm saying you're working on a lot of different things on the cancering journey. And nutrition, I bump it up way up there in priority. but it needs to be doable. It needs to be relatable. It needs to taste good, and it needs to be supportive of somebody, because we don't want to add to what we talked about last time, which is the stress. So look at that beautiful face of Jen. Does she look stressful? Like, she could lead you through this like this, we could all be keto. Anyway, if it's okay with you, Jen, unless of course you have any more resources, those two, I would like to ask you a few questions from our listeners, if that works.
I would love that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go in order. So I'm not picking anybody's favorite. I'm not picking the favorite listener. All right, so here, this question is from Candace. Hi, Candace. I heard mentioned somewhere that ketogenic diet isn't great for menopausal women, that we need some healthy carbohydrates to manage our adrenal health, sleep quality, and stress response. Is this the case, that a more cyclic keto diet is better for long-term health? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that question. And I guess I would ask, are we talking about a therapeutic diet for oncology, or are we talking about
In general.
like kind of a long-term wellness plan?
Mm,
A prevention plan. So if it's the long-term prevention plan, I don't know that a ketogenic diet wouldn't be good, but I think cycling in and out, and I don't know if the Candace is listening to Dr. Mindy Pels, but I really love her work a lot. And she is amazing and really dedicates her work to a lot of women and where we are in different parts of her cycle. So she's awesome. She has a book coming out called Fast Like a Girl. It's in my Amazon cart waiting to be sent because it's the pre-order. But she's really awesome and talks a lot about this. I just listened to a podcast over the weekend about it.
what's
So
her last name again?
Pelz, Pelz.
Okay.
She's great. And I hear you, what you're saying. If it is somebody, if we're really working on a therapeutic diet for cancer, then we might still utilize it, even though somebody obviously is post-menopause. I think it can work, but I think the cycling, and maybe it's a low level of ketosis where people are very metabolically flexible. They're not
Good.
having to like test their ketones all the time and stuff.
Good, good. Candace, I
Mhm.
hope that answers your question. If you have further questions, you can always feel free, and I will give that contact information at the end and we can follow up. This question is from Jennifer. At Remission Nutrition, do you reference folks to cookbooks for keto recipes once they start working with you? So she asked that question before you
Yeah.
gave the resources, but do you have anything you want to add to that for Jennifer?
Yeah, those are a couple, like I said, of my favorites. We also try to give away, or not give away, but give out as many kind of recipes as possible that we've tried on our website. And I wanted to mention this right now. You can go to remissionnutrition.com. And if you sign up for the newsletter, there's actually a discount code to give you a 10 recipe pack. Now, I will tell you that those recipes are also in the metabolic approach to cancer. They're the
Mm.
terrain recipes at the end. So there is that as an option. But yeah, we definitely do. I'm constantly like, if somebody's like, somebody told me one time, this is terrible, but they were like, s'mores, they're my favorite food.
Oh my
I want
God.
s'mores. And I was like, fine. And so I went and found, a recipe for these keto s'mores. Now, granted, the ingredients were probably not incredible in terms of health, but they weren't processed. It was a homemade thing that they could
Mm.
make, the little marshmallow and the chocolate and the graham cracker. So
Yeah.
we do it all
For
the
an
time.
occasional treat. Wait until
Yeah,
you
if I
hear the
have
next
somebody
couple
who's
of.
like, yeah, I love whatever, some sort of ethnic food, like Indian food or something like that, I'll find different places where they can go to get some recipes. So
You and I are, again, similar, because I love that investigation too, because for me, if you can find a way to make something taste delicious that is super healthy, then people start to go, then they're thinking about it. But whereas if you launch off into the most bare bone recipe of keto, where it's kind of like, I think we talked about this, the farmer's juice that I drink.
yeah, yeah,
It tastes like grass.
yeah,
I do it because I make sure that I have that no sugar, low sugar, all vegetables, but it isn't for everybody. I wouldn't necessarily give that to somebody who is just starting off. It's a
yeah.
acquired taste, and even
And
then it's marginal. All
totally.
right, I've got a siren going by here, so forgive me. All right, our next question. Christine says, can you specify good fats to use so people don't use poor quality oils and products to get their fats? I think that's an awesome question as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always, in my reports, I always give a list like these are the best fats for somebody in particular. And here are some to avoid. So definitely, I am a fan of, as long as people don't go overboard with it, with some grass fed butter or ghee.
Mm-hmm.
Ghee can be lovely. I also use a lot of olive oil. I usually say we can't go overboard with olive oil. I love olives. I love olive tapenade. So there again are the sauces where you add capers to it and you add more olive oil to it. Then you get a ton of salt. I like coconut, but I don't just use coconut. So coconut oil is nice if I'm making some cauliflower rice and things like that. I don't go overboard. I use MCT oil, MCT8 only, not the blends. It's easier on the GI or the gut. Um, and I go with the organic one. I use Natural Force is the one that I use. It's in a glass bottle because I try not to get things in plastic, and a lot of the MCT oils are in plastic. So I like, yeah, nuts and seeds. We can go overboard with those as well. I try to avoid, the yucky oils. I think most of us know what those are. I don't do flaxseed oil either. And that is one that's a little bit, it's pretty common for a lot of people. And so it can be it's easily oxidative. It's, can become toxic quite
Mm-hmm.
quickly. So I just don't use it. I use ground flax for some people, but not flaxseed oil.
Mm.
So that's, what did I say? Butter, olive oil. Sorry, I use avocado oil too. I like to use avocado oil in cooking. I still don't try not to do anything in high heat, but it tends to hold up a little bit better. There's some controversy about this as well,
Mm-hmm.
but my biggest thing is don't use the same exact oil all the time. Mix it up.
Oh, I like that. I have not heard that recommendation before.
Yeah,
Don't use
because
the exact oil all the time. Mix it
yeah,
up.
if you're just using coconut oil, that could become an issue. If you're just using butter, if you're just using, so mix it up, variety. And olive oil is for sure like my primary oil source.
Mm, mm. What's your favorite brand of grass-fed butter? Which one do you use?
Oh gosh. Well, I do use Kerrygold sometimes. I kind
Yeah.
of buy whatever is on sale. Um, you know, I get the high quality stuff at the market, but I don't
Yeah.
really have a preference.
So Jen, Candace, back to Candace. I'm gonna let you answer this question first, and I'll go second. Do both of you eat keto? Is what she would like to know.
Oh, yeah, I love that question. I am sort of, gosh, that's kind of me being really personal, but I'm kind of going through menopause right now. No, and I don't know that's why I just don't eat keto all the time.
Mm,
I just did a 5-day water fast and I was pretty darn keto then. And then I did some traveling and I let in some things that were not keto. I do grain free. I don't eat sugar as much as possible. I have some dark chocolate that I love. So I'm grain free, pretty darn low carb. And I do eat sometimes some sweet potatoes, sometimes some squash, depending on the season, and some fruit.
nice. All right.
That's my,
Here's my answer, Candace. Candace, I eat squeaky, squeaky clean. I also move in and out of strict keto, and I'll piggyback and make Jen feel better. I am after menopause, so I'm there, or I'm in there. So the thing is that I know what my body can tolerate in the way of that, and I feel very good with my primary. The other thing I want to say is that I don't eat any red meat. So, and I also don't eat like pork. I have to be really supportive of my protein. And so clean eating for me is how I would describe the majority of how I eat. But very much leaning into the keto side of it. And for sure, I am somebody who can absolutely commiserate with the sugar issue. I do my darndest to run as far away from it as possible. That is a weak spot for me. And what can I say? I'm human.
yeah,
I might have been leaning in when Jen was talking about the s'more recipe.
right,
Just kidding.
exactly.
All right.
Well, yeah,
Go ahead.
that's
Go
all.
ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like I can move in and out of ketosis quite
Yes.
easily. And that's
Same.
taken me a lot of time. And I was a sugar junkie, for sure. And I ate very often and all of those things. So it feels really good to be balanced. And that's ultimately the goal, especially when we're talking about prevention.
100%. 100%. And here's the other thing. Jen and I opt in. I mean, I will try anything that I have tried everything that I've ever recommended. And I will share this with you, Candace. Nothing tastes as good as feeling healthy feels. I truly mean that, because when you're able to go in and out of this, you don't feel so great going back to the way you might have been eating before. So eating this way is supportive of feeling really great as well. And so if it's an also double plus bonus of supporting healing, how to me it's something, it would be something to be looked at and decided upon whether or not it was for me or you personally. I hope that answers your question. So Jen and I say we're human, but yes, we both eat keto. Natasha wants to know who is the author of the Mediterranean cookbook that you recommended, and we just have a couple
Oh,
minutes.
yeah, no
Go ahead.
worries. So there's a woman who has a book or a web, sorry, it's an app. It's called the Keto Diet app.
Mm,
And she is one of the authors in it. So it's also a great website to go to if you want to do some searches in her recipes. You don't have to pay for the app. I'm sure she'd like you to, but you don't have to. You can go and grab some of her recipes. I can't say her last name. It's Martina, and it's Slaj, nor can I see Erova. And
one more
there's
time. Slajaeova.
Rova.
I'm not going to take a stab at it either. We don't have.
Yeah. So there's four different authors, but she's kind of, I think, the main one. And again, she's Keto Diet app where there's some great recipes too.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. All right, Jennifer, and let's take. I'm going to take two, maybe three more questions. Jennifer's asked any suggestions to someone struggling with candida overgrowth that you can talk about, or is that a depends?
Do you mean as it relates to a ketogenic diet or just in general?
Let's see when she comes back in. We'll move to the next question.
Okay.
All right, Bonnie wants to know. I would really like Jen to talk about cheese too. Could you please talk about cheese? I love cheese, but I've been advised to cut it out because of my lipids.
Yep. And that's an interesting one. So I look at a lot of different factors when I'm talking about dairy in general. So I would look at genetics for some people. If we have that, again, that luxury of having a genetic report, I use Nutrition Genome, and that can answer some questions. We also like to look at some lab work. So IGF-1 is one of them. That's insulin-like growth factor. And that can tell us some things. So if somebody has really elevated growth factor, then I'm really careful with dairy. If lipids are an issue, I would have to see, what those look like. Sometimes lipids can have more to do with not enough omega-3 fats, which would be from fatty fish oils, things like that, cod liver oil, and blood sugar imbalances. So it just sort of depends, because oftentimes saturated fat just gets attacked when maybe it doesn't need to be getting attacked. So it really does kind of depend on what numbers are wonky. I think that the thing with dairy is it's got to be the highest quality dairy.
Mm.
And maybe you don't eat gobs and gobs of it, but use it as a flavoring. Like one of the best things is I've learned more recently that goat and sheep products have a lot more MCT, which is medium chain triglyceride, which is that awesome fat that has that ability to cross, like feed the brain basically. So it's a really great fat. So I love those two products. Usually they're higher quality in my opinion too.
Mm.
And goat and sheep products have less lactose, which is the milk sugar that might be problematic.
Love it.
So,
Love it.
yeah.
That is great answer. So far, I have not gotten a response back from the question that our listener asked, but I do have not a question, but gratitude from Kelly. She just wanted to say thank you. Her partner, she and her partner watched last month, and they have an appointment to start working with Dr. Aaron Singh. So she just wanted to say thank you for the information. All right, so I will make sure that. I'm trying to look back to see real quick where the question was. It seems to have disappeared.
About candida.
Yeah, I'm looking for it real quick. Let me just see. We'll take that one offline and get when I get more information, I'll put that in front of you if that's okay.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely. And
All
I'll
right.
send studies too.
So we have gone over just a little bit. I knew we would because I knew that this was going to be a hot topic. Jen, Thank you. I'm very, very excited. We actually have Jen one more time at least next month, and we are going to be talking about juicing and smoothies, another awesome topic that I'm sure that you and I will get after in just that special way. So um, I want to say thank you to you all for dialing in. This has just been incredible. A reminder that it's been recorded. It'll be a day or so. And between Jen and I've taken really good notes, and I will make sure that you have on the replay, underneath of it will be the resources that Jen mentioned. I also want to do a quick plug. Again, if this is something that you are thinking about, please reach out to me. It's Stacy, Stacy, at believebig.org. And I will point you in the direction. If you don't know how to find Jen and her team, I will point you in that direction. We also have a couple of other resources inside, and you have access to all the former sessions. So before you dive into it, might be worth taking a look at any episode that you might have missed to see if we can answer the questions that way. Ask me the questions directly, and I will make sure that they're in front of the appropriate person to get you that information. And please don't discount the magnitude and the power of working with somebody like Jen. It just really is that important to find a way to enter into something like this with the appropriate professional to guide your journey, to make sure you are in fact on track to do what it is that you want to do, which is heal. And I'm truly very passionate about helping you do that. So thank you all. I appreciate your questions. And again, mwah, to Jen. And we'll see you guys next month. And thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.